I was able to work again, actually work out again, and actually be able to, if I wanted to, have caffeine in the morning without feeling like I'm going to have a heart attack.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brian Hutchison, and many of you may already know Derick, and if you don't, he's joined us after about 10 months since we filmed his last video. So, Derick, thanks for coming back in again.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and we wanted to, first of all, give a little bit of an update that Derick's been doing great. So tell us a little bit about how you've been over the last year.
Doing really well, improvements. Been seeing you every other month lately, and that's helping a lot for the last year to actually improve where basically no palpitations, and if I do, it's from a physical activity that I've done.
Yeah, cool. So Derick, if we rewind to approximately a year and a half or 2 years ago, Derick was in dire straits. I mean, he felt like he was going to die almost every day. And tell us a little bit about, first of all, how it was going through that process and where you feel like you got the most results for returning you to normal life and what you're able to do now.
Yeah, so from starting at the beginning, it was couldn't go to work. I'd have palpitations, and I could only sit in a certain position at all times just to feel like I wasn't going to die. And then from there, my initial consultation with you, working our way up from there, positioning my spine and my vagus nerve, getting it unpinched has tremendously got me back to where I need to be, to where now I can act like a normal person.
Derick, a year and a half or 2 years ago, I mean, you were in, panic mode. You spent, thousands and thousands of dollars going to advanced different kinds of cardiologists. And I mean, the doctors you went to, I probably don't even know all of them. You went to so many different doctors. But, at one point, they didn't know what to do. They knew you were having symptoms, but they recommended putting a pacemaker in.
Right.
And, when you heard you needed a pacemaker, what did that trigger in you? And how did you end up finding, well, maybe this is a structural issue after all?
Yeah, that was a major turning point in this journey, because realizing now that if I would have went down that path and had a pacemaker, or if they would have done any type of surgery on me, then that would have messed me up completely for life, because then you can't reverse that versus actually putting your spine back in place and then having that operate correctly. And then that was a fight or flight for me whenever they did say pacemaker, and then I realized maybe there is something else that I could go and get a second opinion for.
Yeah. And it's not to say that pacemakers save many people's lives. And, I'm a big proponent of integrative medicine and working together, and surgery can be the best option at times. But, you were in your early 30s when you first figured this out, and you were overall healthy. Besides, you knew you had a little bit of a scoliosis, but, these symptoms, they just started kind of out of nowhere, didn't they?
They did, yes, especially the palpitations, because it was always very random and I didn't know why it was occurring.
Yeah.
And then over time, it started where it was once a week to once a day, and then all of a sudden it was just over and over again, and I couldn't do anything until we figured it out.
And nothing drastic had changed in your life during that time when it was getting worse and worse, right?
Not at all. I actually had to make changes myself, where no caffeine, no alcohol. I had to sleep at least 8 to 10 hours a day. I was living like I was 90, like on my deathbed.
Yeah, so you were being really careful. You cut out any kind of thing that would mess with your heart rhythm. No caffeine, no alcohol.
Sugar, nothing.
You had, your list of supplements. I saw it one time. You had like a whole, like a, what, 40 or 50 supplements that you were taking
Just to feel normal.
just to feel decent, right? Throughout the day.
Yes.
And it's kind of interesting because, so you exhausted detoxifying and purifying your body. That helped you a little bit, but you still felt like, very often like you were going to die. The heart palpitations were crazy. What were some of the other symptoms you had?
Anxiety, racing heart rate, sweating, just nervousness in general, sleep apnea, clenching the teeth at night, all of these seizures whenever I was actually younger because of this. And the only thing that really actually made it happen was to fix it was putting my neck back in place and you working on it and doing the dry needling. There's no other solution, really.
So, yeah, what would you say that with these kind of symptoms, I would tell people it is good to first just get cleared by a cardiologist. But,
Absolutely.
So you went and they said they couldn't find too many things?
I saw 3 cardiologists, and then one misdiagnosed me with mitral valve prolapse. The other one didn't know what a vagus nerve was, and then the third one wanted to do the pacemaker.
Okay. But they couldn't find anything really.
No, there was nothing structurally wrong. I did stress tests, EKGs, Holter monitors, everything, and they still couldn't come up with anything other than let's just do a pacemaker and see what happens, or put you on beta blockers for life.
So the pacemaker was not because there was a pathology that they're like, you absolutely need it, but it was more because your symptoms were so severe that they thought this might help you.
Correct, because they couldn't solve it.
Set the rhythm.
Right, and they couldn't see that there was anything structurally or truly wrong with my heart.
Yeah.
But it had everything to do with my nervous system connected to my muscular structure, right?
Got it. And then what about your heart rate? Was it like changing a lot or?
Yes. Initially, I would breathe in and it would actually raise up. And then whenever I breathe out, it actually would skip a beat and then slow down.
Okay.
And that happened.
And it was more than just a few beats a minute. I mean, it would jump up pretty
significantly. Enough where, anybody, I could have you take my pulse and they would.
You'd feel it. It was pretty obvious.
Oh, yeah.
When you came in the last video we did, it's pretty interesting because we came up with a new term, which was called the Boomerang Curve. And so Derick's spine in the lower neck, Derick's really led me to a lot of miniature discovery, I would say, in a way, which has been tremendous, getting him better and also what we've learned from it. Because up until that point, everybody thought if you have a lordosis, you're good in your cervical spine. But his was so severely forward in the lower neck that's primarily, including the scoliosis, but that was primarily what was causing the irritation on the vagus nerve. And so for Derick, that's when I first decided, hey, we're going to put a weight on that actually is pulling you back to this way.
Which he's folded
and once
twice.
you did that, I mean, you did them, you were very committed, you wore the weights as you were supposed to, and probably about 2 months in, you started to notice some pretty significant improvement.
Yes. Absolutely. That was the main thing, is making sure you're very consistent on the weights, because that is huge. Making sure that everything gets back in place before you go to do any other type of surgery, prolotherapy, anything else. Because other than that, if you don't have your spine in place, then nothing's going to function correctly.
We started working exclusively together before you had gotten any injections. And in that first couple of months, I mean, you already were returning to a lot of your normal life.
Yes, absolutely. I was able to work again, actually work out again, and actually be able to, if I wanted to, have caffeine in the morning without feeling like I'm going to have a heart attack.
Yeah. Cool. So, fast forward, it's been now 10-month follow-up. Derick has seen us, like you said, probably every 2 months. He's local, so a lot of our patients and clients that come from other cities or states or further away, so it's harder to do that. But he's not only maintained his progress, but really has also gotten further improvement. How would you describe the improvement from when we did the video 10 months ago? Like, your life was back. You could have a beer if you wanted. You could have caffeine. You could kind of be a little bit more lax with what you put in your body. You're still health conscious, but you don't have to take all 40 supplements a day. Right. You're not crazy. Like, you had diagnosed also with diabetes insipidus because, right. You're not drinking water constantly. You're not always thirsty anymore. But, how would you say these few follow-up visits have either gotten you further, or what would you say they've done for you over the last several months?
I would say it's still significant, even though I was at 80% solved. It's just getting that extra 20% helps so much, where I don't have to stress anymore about keeping my shoulder in a certain position as much anymore, because we're doing dry needling. Yeah. So that helped a lot too. Mm-hmm. And then just because I still plan on continuing to do this to get those last little bit, so that way it's a constant where I don't have to worry about it every once a month, or once I have a palpitation. Now I don't have to worry about it at all. So the last little bit, I think, is also crucial.
Cool. Yeah. So you were probably 80% better. I don't know what we said in the last video, but you were overall symptomatically better, but you had to still be pretty conscious about exactly how you were holding yourself. And now you're just pretty relaxed. You're feeling good. It takes a lot to get you any kind of little flare up.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. It takes a lot for that too. And then also on the psychology level too, there's this underlying anxiety that I had for so long that's gone away now, because I'm, like you were saying, drinking water all the time and taking vitamins and minerals constantly just because I couldn't keep them in my body. And that helped out tremendously now, to where I don't have to stress as much anymore. Yeah. And that just takes so much weight off of the mental stress about it.
What would you say was kind of the turning point when you got to go from having to be 100% aware every moment about your whole itinerary for the day, like supplement at this time, water at this time, position, and all of a sudden it's like that anxiety started to drop because you knew you were a little better? Like, what was that turning point for you?
Once we finally actually got everything aligned, that was the biggest thing. And then actually being able to to lay down on my back without
symptoms.
yes, because
So you used to lay on your back,
I couldn't lay down at all.
and you'd get the
I would get symptoms at any time. Just
wow.
I couldn't sleep for the longest time, and I'd have to sleep in specific positions just to
Yeah.
fall asleep. And now I'm so much better where I can any type of position, so I can actually relax. So that was the biggest point, and that was about a year, a little bit over a year ago. So whenever I was able to finally get there.
That's great. And I think that that's an important point, is that we test people for sleeping positions. Almost everybody that comes in the office, we check, how are you sleeping? How do you sleep? How's the blood flow in and out of your head when you're sleeping? Sometimes we look at the curvature. We take an image while you're in your sleeping position. And so we want to see, because we did that with you too. We found that, you know, the curvature was abnormal. Adenoral was definitely making you worse because it was pulling your curve too far forward. We had to work on how can we pull it up here, get your left shoulder out wider. And it's pretty interesting because, yeah, I think when people are sleeping well, that's a really important part for recovery in any illness, really.
Absolutely. That was the huge significant part, was able to actually have a full night's sleep without having to wake up because I had palpitations or problems with sleeping.
Yeah. So let's just rewind again for a minute and tell me, when you were going through crisis mode a year and a half ago, whenever it was, and you thought, like, you know, you would say you felt like doom, like you felt like you were going to die, you were nervous about life, didn't know what to do to help it, you know, pacemaker maybe was the only option on the table. How did you start to realize that you're going to be okay, or that, you know, that you didn't have to, without a clean diagnosis, like, okay, this valve in your heart is definitely 100% dysfunctional. If you don't get this surgically repaired, you know, it's going to be a nightmare. Like, you know, you didn't have a clear diagnosis. You know, nobody was sure exactly what to do. How did you start to find, you know, mental peace and hope that, you know, the structural part could get you now 95, 99% resolved?
The biggest thing was actually your videos online.
Yeah.
That was huge to actually significantly show me that the vagus nerve can actually be affected that way.
Yeah.
And actually seeing other people come out of that position that I had and noticing that their symptoms too. Just by even Googling and seeing these videos of the vagus nerve being pinched and just actually realizing that the heart doesn't malfunction just because internally, but it has also everything to do with structurally.
Mm-hmm.
That was the biggest takeaway that I found out of it, to help me realize it. And then just that one session that we had where I was able just to put my shoulder back into place, that significantly showed me, because from then on, I was able to not have any palpitations like I was before. So I think that was a huge, then I realized it was definitely structurally, because before I kept going back, saying, oh, back and forth, maybe
structural, maybe it's,
right. And you know, you never know until you finally, okay, I put my shoulder back.
So early on, we got your shoulder into position,
and that's when I knew, because
you felt relief from that
so much better.
And then you were like, "Oh my gosh! Like, we need now. How do we get it to stay there?" Right?
Absolutely.
So that's where we worked on the curvature, and then also spinal stability. You got just a couple of prolotherapy injections, but it was maybe only 3 or something like that.
Right.
Just 3. But we primarily did a lot of the tendon dry needling, because with scoliosis and kind of how tight you were, and you built up a lot of muscle into this bad position.
Right.
So we had to kind of retrain it all to be out wider. But your story's been a remarkable success. And I mean, is there anything else that you wanted to share? I mean, you mentioned, you're like, Brian, I'm doing so well. You know, now that you've been well for a long time, we've also become friends, which is great. But you're like, let me do a follow-up video and just share kind of how I'm doing. So what else would you want to share, you know, to the people that are watching that maybe are just curious about if they have a structural issue? Maybe they don't know yet. They've always had a low grade, kind of a little bit of a feeling in their heart that, you know, the cardiologist says you're fine. You know, what else would you want to leave on a note for everybody with?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to share where this has been a long time thing that's affected me for my whole life, you know, even from an early age. But the biggest thing was, once I've really learned that it was structurally, it's just that the biggest thing is commitment and doing it, and make sure you're putting in the time. Because if you don't put in the time, it's going to take years. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest thing to understand, that if you're going to do it correctly and not surgery, it's going to take at least 6 months to a year, depending on your severity. Yeah. But like you're saying, that if you start seeing a little bit of any type of symptom, that's when you want to go ahead and get ahead of it. Yep. Instead of waiting until you feel like you're going to die. Yeah. And then it's already too late, because everybody needs to know too, the takeaway is that bones fuse together. And so if you don't get them fixed early, then 20 years down the line, those bones are going to be fused together, and now the only thing that can actually fix you is surgery. and then now you're on meds for life.
Yeah, that's a good point, Derick. I think that so many little tiny symptoms that we just push aside because we just mask it. We have to do 100 things in the day. We caffeinate up and we just push through, even though we know we might have like a little bit of disorientation or brain fog or gentle, like my heart doesn't feel just right, you know, or something like that. Is that very often these could be easy fixes.
Correct.
You know, if we catch them early.
And less expensive too.
And less expensive.
Yes.
You know, and so, yeah, but you know, your case is great because you were kind of in the end route at the end road where like you almost did need to get that surgery.
Right.
But we still pulled you out of it because of your dedication. You know, it took you being 100% mentally with us, doing the homework, making your follow-up appointments. And now, I mean, honestly, I think that if I didn't see you for a year, you'd still be fine. You know what I mean? I really do. I don't know how you feel about that, but
yeah, I feel great.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing fine tunings because you want to be like, you realize where you were and you want to be like ahead of it. Just like you go to the dentist, even if your teeth feel great, like you're like, what else is there? Any little problem you can fix, doc? You're like, you know, you have that desire to just want to be so healthy now, which is awesome. But yeah, I'm just super happy you're doing great. And yeah, thank you for sharing your follow-up.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, cool.